What's up guys, welcome back. This is Anime Crossover. You'll be watching What If Naruto Was a Saiyan Who Crash Landed in the Marvel Cinematic Universe Part 11. Now, let's begin. The Chronopolis Protocol and the Flickering Tree. The destruction of a universe is usually a loud, catastrophic affair. Stars detonate, gravity inverts, and the vacuum of space screams. But the erasure of a concept is entirely silent. Inside the central observation deck of the Panopticon, the sprawling holographic projection of the World Tree was changing. The infinite, glowing canopy of violet and gold branches was no longer stable. Massive clusters of timelines in the Omega Quadrant were stuttering. They didn't burn or explode. They simply flickered, turning translucent before quietly fading into nothingness, as if they had never existed at all. "It's like watching a memory being forgotten," Sam Wilson whispered, his hands gripping the edge of the holodable. "They aren't destroying the branches, Cap. They're poisoning the soil," Tony 892 said, his fingers flying across a hard light keyboard at blinding speed. The liquid silver Aegis Matrix armor rippled nervously across his forearms. Immortus wasn't bluffing. "The chronal Nimrods we killed in the engineering bay broadcasted our genetic baseline back to their central hub. Now, Immortus is firing localized temporal torpedoes into the absolute deep past." Miles Morales stared at the fading branches, the white lenses of his mask narrowing. What happens if they hit the target? Before Tony could answer, Logan staggered. The Wasteland Ronin dropped to one knee, a sudden, ragged gasp tearing from his throat. He clutched his right hand. The skin over his knuckles split open, but it wasn't the indestructible, gleaming adamantium claws that unsheathed themselves. It was jagged, raw, blood-stained bone. "Logan!" Naruto Uzumaki rushed forward, his hands glowing with a soft, restorative golden chakra, but the moment the light touched the mutant, it violently sparked and dissipated. "Don't touch me, kid." Logan gritted his teeth, his breathing heavy as the bone claws suddenly retracted, instantly replaced by the familiar SNIKT of adamantium, before flickering back to bone a second later. "My head. It feels like it's splitting in two. I remember the Weapon X facility. And then I don't. I remember the adamantium. And then it's just bone." Temporal reversion, Tony identified grimly, looking at the biometric scanners. Immortus's torpedoes are currently navigating the time stream, actively hunting the genesis point of the X gene. The timeline hasn't completely collapsed yet, but the localized shockwaves are hitting Logan's personal history. He's caught in a state of quantum superposition. If the Nimrods succeed in the past, Logan will simply fade into ash right here in front of us. Naruto looked at his own hands. The warm, terrestrial hum of the primal gold chakra felt suddenly distant, as if a thick layer of static was interfering with his connection to the life force of his ancestors. The roots of his own existence were under fire. "We cannot fight a war if we are erased before it begins," Naruto said, his blue eyes hardening into iron. He looked at the silver Stark. "Can you track the torpedoes?" "I can do better than track them," Tony said, slamming a final keystroke into the console. The holographic map shifted, displaying the sleek, obsidian multiversal transport ship, the Hiraishin, docked in the lower bay. "I can catch them." The Chronopolis Protocol, the hologram, zoomed in on the Hiraishin, highlighting massive, glowing purple engines that had been jury-rigged to its hull. "I salvaged the temporal drives from the dead Nimrods and wired them directly into the Hiraishin's Wakandan dark matter core," Tony explained, moving to the center of the room. "I call it the Chronopolis Protocol. We can't navigate the time stream blindly. Immortus controls the chronological map. But we can lock onto the quantum wake of the torpedoes he just fired and ride their slipstream all the way back to the exact moment they drop out of hyperspace. We follow the bullet back to the gun." Sam nodded, his tactical mind instantly evaluating the board. "Exactly," Tony confirmed. "But it has to be a surgical strike. The Hiraishin can only carry a small payload through a slipstream that tight." "Then we split the vanguard," Sam commanded, stepping into his role as the absolute anchor of the World Tree's defense. "If Immortus is firing torpedoes into the past, he's going to send his fleets into the present to make sure we can't launch a counter-offensive. I need to hold the Panopticon. If this watchtower falls, the World Tree loses its shield." "I'm staying with you, Cap," Miles volunteered, cracking his knuckles, his Stark tech suit humming with fresh bioelectricity. "Someone has to keep the bugs off the windshield." Sam looked at Naruto, Logan, and Tony. Team Genesis, Sam said, locking eyes with the golden-haired shinobi. You dive. You find the exact moment the timeline diverges, and you hold the line. Protect the ancestors. Protect the spark. If we don't, Logan growled, his claws finally stabilizing into solid adamantium, though the tremor in his hands remained. There won't be a present to come back to. We will anchor the roots, Naruto promised, gripping the heavy, pale marble of the Void Slayer resting on his back. All right, boys. Pack a lunch, Tony said, the Aegis Matrix armor flowing over his face to form a sleek silver faceplate. We're going to the beginning of the world. The chronal slipstream, the launch bay of the Panopticon, was deafening. The Hiraishin hovered above the magnetic deployment rails, its obsidian hull vibrating violently as the scavenged temporal drives spun up. The air around the ship warped, bleeding purple chronological energy as reality began to bend. Inside the cockpit, Tony sat at the helm, his hands seamlessly interfaced with the ship's control yokes. Logan strapped himself into the co-pilot seat, chewing aggressively on an unlit cigar, his knuckles white as he fought the nauseating waves of temporal reversion continuing to assault his mind. Naruto stood in the center of the cargo bay, his feet planted firmly on the vibranium deck. He didn't sit. He closed his eyes, focusing entirely on the flickering, unstable connection to the primal gold, using his absolute will to keep the chakra network from unraveling before they even launched. Slipstream lock achieved, Tony announced over the internal comms, the monitors bathing his silver armor in harsh red light. The Nimrod torpedoes are dropping into a localized temporal pocket approximately 2 million years in the past. Coordinates map to an overlapping dimensional genesis point. Planet Sadala. Proto-Earth. The cradle, Naruto murmured, his eyes snapping open, burning with a fierce, protective light. Outside the viewport, the massive blast doors of the Panopticon opened, revealing the dark, infinite expanse of the quantum bleed. Sam, Tony broadcasted to the command deck. Keep the porch light on for us. Give them hell, Tony. Sam's voice crackled back over the comms. Vanguard out. Engaging Chronopolis Protocol, Tony commanded. He thrust the control yokes forward. The Hiraishin didn't fly out of the launch bay. It simply ceased to exist in the present tense. The ship violently shattered the barrier of linear time, plunging into a swirling, blinding vortex of pure chronological plasma. The G-force was not physical, it was ontological. Naruto felt the weight of millions of years of history rushing past them in a fraction of a millisecond. Through the viewport, the stars were replaced by streaks of raw, unwritten reality. Ahead of them, in the chaotic, swirling tunnel of the slipstream, 3 massive, glowing red temporal torpedoes were tearing through the fabric of time, escorted by a dozen chronal Nimrods flying in tight formation. Target acquired. Tony yelled over the roar of the timeline tearing around them. Hold on, we're coming in hot. The Hiraishin accelerated, diving deeper into the ancient dark, hurtling toward the absolute genesis of the multiverse's greatest warriors. The time war had officially begun. The historical slipstream did not conclude with a smooth deceleration. It concluded in a horrific, ontological car wreck. The Hiraishin dramatically violated the chronology, plunging into the distant past. The obsidian transport hopped across the sky like a stone on a furious ocean. Its dark matter core screamed as it struggled to stabilize against unwritten physical laws. Brace for impact. Tony 892 shouted, fighting the hefty control yokes as the ship careened toward the sprawling jungle canopy. The Hiraishin cut a mile-long trench through prehistoric woods before forcefully burying itself in the side of a gigantic, brilliant crystalline mountain. The cargo bay's emergency lights flickered, throwing a dim red glow over the smoke. Logan tore off his restraining harness with a furious snarl and stumbled forward. He dropped on the deck, hands gripping his head. The temporal reversion was terrible. His adamantium skeleton rapidly flashed, returning to raw, blood-stained bone and then snapping back to metal a second later. My head. It's tearing me apart, Logan muttered, his healing factor burning as it furiously fought to restore skin that couldn't tell which age it belonged to. Naruto Uzumaki forced himself up off the deck, his breathing shallow and erratic. He gazed at his hands. The blazing, earthy fire of the primal gold aura was completely gone. He tried to shape his chakra, but it felt hollow and detached, like drawing water from a well that had not yet been drilled. The timeline. Naruto wheezed and leaned heavily against the bulkhead. Our biology. It has not evolved yet. The universe does not recognize us. The cargo bay doors opened and landed with a hard thump in the primeval earth. Tony Stark strode down the slope, his liquid silver Aegis Matrix armor covering his torso. The Endo-Sim was a self-contained physical system that functioned independently from the timeline's ancestral roots, unlike biological powers. "Welcome to the beginning of the world," Tony remarked, walking out into the primordial light. The primordial nexus. Naruto and Logan struggled down the ramp, squinting against the glaring glare. The environment was gorgeous, terrible, and entirely unfamiliar. It wasn't Earth, nor was it Sadala. It was a dimensional nexus, an overlapping pocket of raw, unformed reality in which the fundamental building blocks of numerous universes were still cooling. Massive, monolithic crystalline structures sprang from the crimson ground, emitting pure multiversal radiation. The sky wasn't blue. It was a swirling, screaming canvas of raw nebulae and fledgling stars, unprotected by a stable atmosphere. "My scanners are going crazy," Tony analyzed, his HUD presenting a swarm of data. "The ambient energy here is so thick that you could cut it with a knife. This is a cradle. The precise genetic and spiritual intersection at which the primal Saiyans and the first chakra wielders meet." A loud, deafening boom echoed across the airspace. 3 miles above the jungle canopy, a temporal pocket ripped open. The 3 chronal Nimrods slid out of the slipstream, completely untouched by archaic physics. They didn't descend to fight. They stayed poised in the air, lifting their arms in perfect synchrony. Between them, a huge and dynamic geometric edifice emerged. It resembled a massive, floating tuning fork crafted from iridescent chronal metal. The Nimrod's synchronized voices, concept extraction engine deployed, rang across the primordial plane, targeting ancestral anomalies, commencing ontological erasure. The huge tuning fork started to hum. It did not make a sound, rather, it emanated a frequency of absolute absence. "They're not going to hunt down the ancestors one by one," Tony understood, the silver armor locking down as the ambient pressure increased. "They're going to broadcast a localized frequency that simply unwrites the genetic concept of the X gene and the Saiyan spark from the primordial ooze. We have to break that machine," Logan muttered, pulling himself to his feet. His claws lengthened, revealing 3 jagged, raw bones jutting from his knuckles. The adamantium was temporarily lost due to the shifting timeline. "We can't fly, and we don't have the energy to fight." Naruto clenched his teeth, feeling the terrible, empty weight of his dormant chakra network. Before they could strategize, the jungle around them moved. The ancestral spark, a group of individuals, came from the shadows of gigantic, crystalline trees. They were tall, powerful, and dressed in primitive pelts of ancient animals. Heavy, furry tails lashed wildly behind them. Their eyes were wild, untamed, and filled with an unrefined golden glow. They were the Proto-Saiyans. The guy leading them stood slightly away. He lacked a tail, yet his body hummed with a calm, serene energy that contrasted sharply with the ape's ferocity. He was a proto-shinobi, a conduit for the spiritual energy that would eventually become the God Tree. The ancestors paused, raised their stone spears, and gazed at the 3 fallen oddities from the sky. Naruto stepped forward and lifted his hands in a peaceful gesture. He did not speak. He could not. The chronology did not share a language. Instead, Naruto reached deep into his chest, past the dormant, hyper-refined shinobi networks and the multiversal void sage radiation, down to the absolute, microscopic foundation of his existence. He exuded a strong sense of spirituality, survival. The calm proto-shinobi's eyes widened. He dropped his spear, recognizing a distant, refined echo of his own developing soul. The Proto-Saiyan commander grumbled as he sensed Naruto's terrible, dormant genetics. The forefathers didn't attack. They separated ways, enabling the Golden Saint to pass among them. "They recognize the spark," Naruto muttered, glancing at his hands as the primordial world's ambient, raw energy started to passively swirl around him. The hum of the Nimrod's concept extraction engine became louder. The ground began to tremble, and the Proto-Saiyans yelled out in excruciating anguish, grasping their heads as the erasing frequency attacked their genetic lineage directly. "The engine is starting," Tony cautioned, his armor's repulsors groaning into life. I can buy you a few minutes, but my repulsors cannot detect devices in quantum superposition. Logan growled, his bone claws dripping with blood. Don't shoot where they are. If I shoot, they'll just phase into the future. Shoot where they're going to be. Quantum chronodynamics. Tony Stark gazed up at the phasing machines in the sky before focusing on his hands. A predictive algorithm, Tony mumbled, his brilliant mind running at the speed of light. I can't fight them with just physics. I have to fight them with abstract mathematics. Tony slapped his gauntlets together. He completely deactivated the Aegis Matrix's weapons systems. On Friday, transfer all auxiliary power to the cognitive processors. We're creating a new operating system on the fly. As the timeline imploded around him, Silver Stark closed his eyes and began coding. He did not utilize a keyboard. Instead, his thoughts communicated directly with the Endo-Sim network, generating hundreds of lines of localized temporal calculus each second. He was not considering trajectory or wind speed. He was calculating quantum chronodynamics, which is the exact mathematical probability of a Nimrod's temporal phase change based on the chronological weight of its mass. OS update complete. Tony's eyes popped open. The brilliant blue apertures on his faceplate changed to a deep, calculating violet. I've got the math, Tony said confidently. He pointed his repulsors at the empty sky, 40 feet to the left of the closest Nimrod. He fired. A Proto-Saiyan threw a bone spear at the Nimrod, prompting him to leave reality. It appeared 40 feet to the left, exactly 1 second after shifting into the future. It appeared directly in the line of Tony's repulsor beam. The unibeam struck the Nimrod's temporal core, violently staggering the massive machine. It works. Tony yelled as he took to the air, his thrusters flaring brightly. I can read their skips. Logan, distract them on the ground. Logan only needed to be informed once. Driven by the sheer, primal instinct of a cornered animal, the Ronin charged into the conflict. He lacked invincible metal, but he did have a lifetime of fury and the basic savagery of his forefathers. He fought alongside the Proto-Saiyans, tearing through the chronal drones that dropped from the main Nimrods with his bare-bone claws. Chrono-primal sync. Naruto remained motionless in the midst of turmoil, while Tony and Logan provided cover. The erasing frequency from the massive tuning fork in the sky became agonizingly loud. Naruto's vision clouded. The present concept of his chakra was aggressively unwritten. Naruto dropped to his knees, realizing that relying solely on his identity would lead to his demise. The tranquil proto-shinobi crouched beside Naruto and placed a rough, calloused palm on his shoulder. The ancestor did not offer a sophisticated jutsu. He simply offered his own raw, raging life power. Naruto closes his eyes. He stopped attempting to access his sophisticated, highly advanced network. He let it go. He let the perfected procedures, sage modes, and multiversal radiation to drift away. He surrendered to the cradle's powerful energy. Naruto's tactical mind adapted to the raw energy of the Proto-Saiyans and early spiritualists, refusing to be limited by the age. Stick to the principle. Naruto matched his heartbeat to the rhythm of the primordial nexus. He did not absorb the energy, rather, he linked with it. During the chrono-primal synchronization, Naruto's eyes opened. The irises were not the polished blue of a shinobi or the dazzling gold of the Sunbreaker. They were a deep, weighty, terrifying violet gold. The hue of a concept solidifying into complete truth. The air around him did not burst. After locking into place, Naruto stood up. The Nimrod's engine's erasure frequency flowed over him, yet it did not totally erase him. He was no longer a product of the future. He had successfully anchored his spirit to the unchanging foundation of the past. Tony, Naruto's voice did not reverberate. It held the absolute, calm weight of a fundamental physical law. Drop the vanguard. Tony 892 unleashed an EMP burst that briefly blinded the Nimrod's targeting sensors as he weaved through their temporal phase shifts. Naruto sketched the Void Slayer. The marble blade ignited with a mandala of violet gold energy, rather than bare fire. Naruto bent his knees and felt the raw, untamed ground of the primeval cradle beneath his boots. He stared up at the massive concept extraction engine in the sky. It was time to preserve the multiverse's heritage. He didn't just jump. Naruto Uzumaki defied the gravity of a new realm. He raced for the great concept extraction engine that swung in the ancient heavens, the wild, unbridled power of the primordial cradle driving him on. He wasn't counting on the hyper-evolved chakra of the future. He was driven by the chrono-primal sync, a direct, unfiltered link to the ancestors battling in the earth below him. The three chronal Nimrods felt the menace at once. Anomaly rising. Adjusting erasure frequency, the machines intoned in unison, aiming the great pearlescent tuning fork directly toward the rising shinobi. A wave of absolute chronal erasure, a laser designed to unwrite the fundamental concept of his being, slammed down on him. But Naruto did not die away. Epic Avenger mode, Primal Gold. The deep terrible violet gold energy burst from his core. It did not make a fierce scorching sun behind him, it formed a huge, perfectly organized, spinning clockwork mandala of pure kinetic and spiritual life energy. The mandala was a chronological anchor, its gears grinding against the erasing wave, physically mashing the unwriting frequency into harmless sparks of temporal light. Naruto blasted past the erase beam and closed the distance to the engine. The panopticon under siege, the current timeline, was screaming, millions of years ahead. Under severe siege was the panopticon, above the Latvarian wastelands. Immortus hadn't arrived himself, but he had sent an armada of sleek, purple and silver chrono dreadnoughts to anchor the watchtowers in place, so the Alliance could not move troops into the slipstream. All auxiliary power to the forward kinetic dampeners. Sam Wilson yelled from the command deck, his hands moving rapidly across the tactical holodouble. Outside the window, thousands of Tony's liquid silver Aegis Matrix drones swarmed the dreadnoughts in a frantic, living barrier surrounding the watchtower. But the dreadnoughts were shooting localized chronal torpedoes, weapons that didn't explode, but aged everything they hit into dust. "They're dodging the drone swarm," Hope Van Dyne said, watching the orbital path. "3 torpedoes have locked onto our main dark matter core. Impact in 10 seconds. Not if I reach him first," a crackle on the communications said. Outside, in the frozen vacuum of the upper stratosphere, Miles Morales hung from the outside hull of the panopticon. His red and black armor was sealed for high-altitude battle, but he had no bioelectric reserves. He couldn't blow the torpedoes off. But he didn't need the poison. He was on a roll. Miles leapt off the hull of the watchtower, plummeting straight into the incoming chronal torpedoes. "Spider-Man, those payloads will kill you on impact," Sam shouted. "Then I won't touch him." Miles sent out twin lines of his newly calibrated kinetic feedback webbing. The specialized Stark Tech cables whipped forward, precisely lassoing the physical case of the lead torpedo without setting off the time bomb. Miles shoved his foot into a nearby floating Aegis drone and violently changed his center of gravity. With his hyper-dense spider strength, he swung the huge luminous torpedo in a perfect pendulum-like arc. "Return to sender," Miles grumbled, releasing the web lines. The chronal torpedo whipped around and fired right back into the broadside hull of the lead chrono dreadnought. The time payload detonated. The dreadnought didn't break. It aged violently. It took 3 blinks and the shiny iridescent metal rusted and rotted and fell apart into harmless gray ash that blew away in the winds of the atmosphere. "Target destroyed," cheered Miles, swinging back to the hull. "Cap, the present is holding." The roots of reality, the conflict was reaching its ultimate peak in the womb of the beginning. Naruto reached the top of his jump, and floated just in front of the enormous concept extraction engine. Tony 892 was using the quantum chronodynamics OS beneath him to blast Nimrods out of their temporal phase shifts, while Logan cut through the grounded drones with the Proto Saiyans. The Void Slayer was raised by Naruto, a celestial marble loaded with the spinning violet gold energy of the Epic Avenger state. "If I break the engine, the stored erasure energy will detonate," Naruto's tactical thinking calculated in a microsecond. "Either way, it will destroy the cradle. I can't break it. I have to filter it." Naruto did not swing the sword to slash. He slammed the heavy marble blade straight into the heart of the extraction mechanism. The machine screamed. The extraction operation stopped dead. The accumulated, catastrophic temporal energy violently backfired, surging up the blade of the sword, and directly into Naruto's body. Raw chronological plasma rushed Naruto's cells, and he shouted. It was attempting to unwrite his DNA, to delete from his blood the idea of chakra and the Saiyan spark. But his biology wouldn't give up. Naruto pulled himself into the chrono-primal sync, using his hyper-dense Saiyan physiology as a physical, multiversal filter. He worked the chaotic, erasing energy through his system, stripping it of the destructive coating of Immortus and transmuted it into pure, unadulterated timeline stabilization. Naruto spread his arms wide, the violet gold mandala behind him spinning at a blinding speed. He released the filtered energy. From Naruto's chest exploded a huge wave of bright violet gold light. It passed across the primeval jungle. It blasted through the towering calm proto-shinobi, the howling wild proto-saiyans. It passed past Logan. The wasteland Ronin gasped, falling to his knees. Then the excruciating temporal reversion came to an abrupt halt. The raw, bloodied bone of his knuckles was soon covered in bright, impenetrable silver. Remade adamantium. His past was secure. The wave spread, covering the whole globe, inscribing the genetic and spiritual heritage of the forefathers into the immutable bedrock of the multiverse. The X gene and the Saiyan spark and the chakra network were now fixed, essential notions. Never again could they be eliminated retroactively. The concept extraction engine, without its target and caught up in the stabilizing wave, shattered into harmless glass. The chronal Nimrods crashed down, their temporal cores burning out permanently. The future without protection, the timeline solidified violently. The primeval epic actively opposed the temporal irregularities. The past was sealed forever. The localized pocket of reality folded. The timeline is snapping back, shouted Tony, repulsors whining, as the Hiraishin was brutally sucked up into the air by an invisible chronological undertow. Hit us out. Naruto plunged from the sky, completely depleted, the violet gold aura dissipated. Logan was hauling himself up the ramp of the hovering transport ship when Tony seized him mid-air. They didn't even have time to strap themselves in before the Hiraishin was brutally pulled from the prehistoric atmosphere, slingshotting into the purple plasma of the slipstream, smashing heavily onto the launch deck of the present-day Panopticon. The doors hissed open. Sam and Miles were already there, in the smoldering ashes of Dreadnought ruin. Logan caught Naruto as he fell down the ramp. The Golden Saint was damaged, but the fierce fire in his blue eyes showed that the mission was a success. Anchored our roots, Naruto said, staring up at the captain. The past is secure. Suddenly the central holodouble on the command deck sprang to life. The security mechanisms of the Panopticon had been completely circumvented. A huge, high-fidelity hard light projection of Immortus appeared in the middle of the room. The Prime variant didn't look angry, he looked deeply, icily pleased. You have fought well, Anomalies, Immortus said, his voice filled with temporal, absolute certainty. You closed the door on your history with all the strength you could muster. You have sealed your past forever. Immortus moved closer, his eyes glowing with chilly triumph. But a fortress is only as powerful as its weakest wall. If you focus completely on where you came from, you leave where you were going completely defenseless. The holographic representation moved, thousands of histories lurching forward violently, their futures being brutally overridden by dark purple iron and chronological circuitry. The past is yours, breathed Immortus, but tomorrow belongs to the dynasty. The hologram snapped off in static. A thick, smothering hush fell on the room. They'd saved their forefathers, but the main front of the time war was only just beginning. Post-credits scene, the camera scans across a dark, huge, futuristic city. A completely iridescent purple iron and changing temporal geometry. Great clocks go back, they go forward, they go sideways. This is Chronopolis, the final bastion of Immortus, at the end of time itself. In the middle of a vast, carefully guarded square is a huge, historical containment vault, buzzing with suppressive magic and Kong tech. Suddenly the great vault doors glow with a dazzling, searing heat. Crash. The doors burst violently outward in a tremendous explosion of pure, concentrated ruby-red kinetic energy. Chrono-Centurions are flying through the plaza like rag dolls. Across his eyes is strapped a sleek, polished ruby quartz visor, glowing with terrible, barely restrained power. He halts and gazes up at the impossible, changeable sky of Chronopolis. He touches two fingers to the comm link in his cowl. The cage is broken. The time war has begun, the mutant says, his voice cool, tactical, authoritative. X-Men, together. The holographic projection of the World Tree on the Panopticon's viewing deck was a disturbing sight. Naruto's epic Avenger condition stabilized the past and present, resulting in a dazzling violet gold glow in the roots and center trunk. However, the upper canopy, which symbolized the boundless branches of the future, was dying. It wasn't burning away, it was crystallizing. A creeping, iridescent purple illness was erasing future timelines, transforming organic likelihood into cold, preset chronological iron. Immortus isn't just conquering the future, Tony 892 said, retracting his liquid silver Aegis Matrix armor and revealing his pale, tired face. He is formatting the hard drive. He is eliminating every conceivable tomorrow that does not end with him seated on Chronopolis' throne. Can we track the focal point of the overwrite? Sam Wilson inquired, relying primarily on the tactical holodable. I can, Tony responded, moving his fingers across the light keys. However, the coordinates are impossible. The signal is not coming from a specific year. It's coming from the very end of time. A limited pocket reality on the verge of the universe's heat death. Naruto Uzumaki stood by the viewport, looking out into the darkness of the quantum bleed. The primal gold aura was completely inactive, his chakra network recovering from the tremendous exertion in the primordial cradle. He was physically exhausted, but his sovereign senses, the Void Sage's passive, multidimensional awareness, were twitching fiercely. Tony, Naruto murmured quietly, without turning around. There is a pulse in the static. A pulse? Tony grimaced while tuning the Panopticon's tachyon arrays. Naruto, Comtech is actively overriding the future. It is all static. Not all of it, Logan said from the corner of the room. The wasteland Ronin stood stiff, his heightened senses fixed on something no one else could notice. His adamantium claws slid out half an inch with a soft metallic snick, then retracted. Logan said, "Play the audio feed from the deepest temporal frequency," his voice filled with unintelligible emotion. Tony tapped a command, "Filter out the chronological plasma." The command deck was flooded with the loud boom of Immortus's timeline overwrite. Tony used a Wakandan audio isolation method to remove cosmic noise layer by layer. A murmur might be heard beneath the noise of the vanishing future. It was a focused explosion of kinetic energy. FWOOSH, FWOOSH. The unmistakable BAMF of displaced air is followed by a loud crackle of lightning. Then a voice broke through the static. It was significantly warped by the distance of infinite time, but it was nonetheless serene, dominating, and absolute. A breach occurred at Sector 4. Roan, hold the left flank. Kurt, get the civilians inside the time bunkers. This is the line we will hold. X-Men, push forward. Logan's cigar slid from his teeth and landed on the vibranium deck. Logan muttered, staring at the audio visualizer as if looking for a ghost. That's Slim. Who is Slim? Miles Morales inquired, his eyes widening. Logan gasped. Scott Summers, the weight of a century's loss lifted off his shoulders. Cyclops. Leader of the X-Men. God Emperor Doom told me he had wiped them out. I felt I was the last one left. They aren't dead, Sam Wilson realized, gazing at the holographic representation of the crystalline future. Immortus did not let Doom kill them. He snatched them. He imprisoned the X-Men in the end of time to study their mutations and develop his anti-mutant Nimrods. And it sounds like they just broke out, Tony smirked and tapped the console. Friday, trace that kinetic signature. During the siege of Chronopolis, the sky was filled with dying stars and complete darkness. Chronopolis, Immortus's future bastion, was a well-organized city. However, Sector 4 was currently in a condition of complete, magnificent disarray. A platoon of 50 Chrono Centurions, armed with temporal stasis guns, proceeded in a phalanx down a vast iron causeway. They didn't make it 10 feet. A focused beam of ruby-red kinetic energy struck the phalanx. It wasn't a laser, it had the pure concussive force of a localized asteroid strike. The beam ripped through the Centurions' pearlescent chronal shields, scattering them like bowling pins and ripping the iron causeway in half. Scott Summers stood at the edge of catastrophe. He wore a dark blue and yellow combat outfit made from discarded Kong tech. His hand was firmly placed on the side of his flashing ruby quartz visor. They're falling back to the primary vault. Cyclops yelled above the roar of the alarms. Storm, clear the airspace. Aurora Munro's eyes blazed white as she hovered high above the plaza, her hair swirling in a created gale. She did not call any terrestrial lightning. Drawing on the chaotic, dying forces of the end of time, she summoned a devastating strike of confined, multiversal plasma. The purple lightning destroyed 3 inbound chrono dreadnoughts before they could deploy their troops. Bamf! A cloud of brimstone burst behind Centurion lines. Nightcrawler, carrying twin cutlasses salvaged from a fallen Kong variation, transported in a blindingly rapid sequence, demolishing the heavy artillery emplacements before disappearing in a plume of purple smoke. They battled in perfect, scary synchrony. They were hardly a disorganized rebel squad. Rather, they were a hyper-lethal paramilitary strike unit that had spent years surviving in the timeline's deepest cells. Scott. Jean Grey stood near the breached doors of the containment vault, hands pressed to her temples. A large, brilliant aura of pink telekinetic energy flowed around her, protecting a group of tired, liberated mutant versions following her. Immortus is locking down the chronological anchors. Jean sent her voice right into Cyclops' consciousness. The city is about to jump out of this pocket dimension. If he moves Chronopolis, we'll be stuck in the bleed. Cyclops gritted his teeth, his visor glowing with intense heat. They had fled the vault, but now they were stranded on an island at the end of the universe, surrounded by an endless ocean of time that they couldn't navigate. "Can you reach out, Jean?" Cyclops inquired, his tactical thoughts racing. "Can you find an anchor?" "I've been trying," Jean said, her psychic aura extending into the vacuum. "The timeline is hazy. But wait. There is a light. It's extremely far away. In the present. It feels like the sun." Naruto Uzumaki gasped within the panopticon during the psychic bridge episode. He staggered forward and grabbed the holodable. His blue eyes widened as he felt a sudden, acute psychic push on the outskirts of his consciousness. It was not an attack. It was a desperate, groping hand reaching into the infinite darkness of the quantum bleed. "Who's out there?" A woman's voice echoed inside Naruto's mind. "I have her," Naruto announced to the command deck, closing his eyes to secure the connection. Despite lacking telepathy, Naruto's Void Sage Chakra served as a powerful conduit to other dimensions. He lit a small, localized spark of primal gold, which served as a lighthouse. Naruto Uzumaki transmitted his spiritual intent back up via the psychic link. "Be anchored to my light. We are the Alliance." At the end of time, Jean Grey gasped, her eyes widening. "I've found them. Scott, someone is anchoring the present. I can send them our exact temporal coordinates." "Do it." Cyclops launched another deadly optic blast to cover their flank. Tony's console in the watchtower displayed a tremendous data explosion. "I've got it." Tony roared and slammed his hand into the main thruster controls. "We have received exact quantum coordinates for Chronopolis. They're not simply handing us a map, they're holding the door open." Sam Wilson grasped his vibranium shield and smiled fiercely. They'd spent the whole time war on the defensive, responding to Kang's attacks. They knew exactly where the Prime variant dwelt. "Logan." Sam gazed at the wasteland Ronin, whose claws were fully extended and his eyes burned with a primal joy. "Ready to see your family?" Logan muttered, "Let's go tear off the roof." "Tony, spool up the Panopticon's primary temporal drives," Sam said, moving to the center of the bridge. "Naruto, keep the telepathic tether open. Don't let them lose the signal." When Naruto opened his eyes, the deep violet gold tracing returned to his skin, serving as a living bridge between the present and the end of time. "The tether is secure, Captain," Naruto said. "All hands, brace for the chronological jump." Sam's voice resonated across the moon-sized citadel. "We are taking the watchtower to the end of time." The Panopticon shivered as its Wakandan dark matter core synchronized with scavenged temporal drives. The space around the gigantic station distorted, gushing purple plasma, before the entire fortress violently tore through the fabric of reality. They did not send a strike team. They brought the entire world tree shield. The Alliance was heading to Chronopolis. There was no sky to the end of time. It was an unending ceiling of total blackness, stifling, with the cold dying embers of the last stars of the universe. In the midst of this heat death was Chronopolis, a huge city the size of a continent, of iridescent purple iron, of shifting geometry and temporal machinery, humming with the stolen energy of limitless futures. The X-Men were being driven back in the center plaza of Sector 4. Cyclops let out a steady, sweeping optic beam that cut down a squad of Chrono Centurions, but for every Kong version that went down, 2 more teleported into the square. The storm's targeted plasma blows were tearing up the iron causeways. but the ambient energy of the dying cosmos was swiftly depleting her stamina. "They're adding heavy armor. Bamf. Nightcrawler," he yelled as he teleported back to the center of the defensive ring. He pointed his looted cutlass at the perimeter. 3 Chronos golems lumbered down the causeways, gargantuan blocky siege engines manufactured of condensed solidified time. They walked, and the earth shook, and not only that, they aged and rusted their surroundings brutally. "Jean, how far away are they?" Cyclops roared. His visor glowed a deadly, hot scarlet as he proceeded to uncap the ruby quartz entirely. Jean Grey went on one knee, the pink telekinetic glow around her flickering fiercely as she maintained the psychic tether across the quantum bleed. "He's right here." The absolute black ceiling of the universe was broken. It wasn't a gate. It was a violent, physical tearing of reality. A gigantic, blinding circle of purple plasma and earthly light tore the fabric of the end of time apart. The panopticon was falling through the rift, obliterating the dying stars utterly. The vast, unfathomable bulk of the Wakandan watchtower the size of a moon had entered the limited pocket dimension, created a catastrophic atmospheric shift. The pearl spires of Chronopolis cracked and crumbled. The unexpected, localized boost in earthly gravity smashed the 3 Chronos golems violently flat against the iron plaza. Hundreds of Wakandan drop pods burst downward like a meteor shower of silver and gold from the underside of the huge castle. Ash and blood reconciliation. The lead drop pod hit dead center in the middle of the plaza, leaving a crater in the pearlescent iron. The blast doors swung open. A silver blur from the pod shot. Tony 892, in the liquid metal Aegis matrix, didn't even touch Earth. He arced in close, horizontal, firing a synchronized swarm of micro-munitions that totally enveloped the advancing line of Chrono Centurions, converting them to sparking trash. Behind him, Sam Wilson swooped down, his vibranium wings springing open. He threw his shield with perfect, deadly geometry, decapitating a Centurion before catching it on the rebound and landing solidly behind Cyclops. "Captain Sam Wilson, Multiversal Alliance," Sam said, raising his shield as the Wakandan vanguard spilled out of the drop pods that had surrounded them. "I hear you guys need a ride." Scott Summers withdrew his hand from his visor and looked upon the inconceivable sight of the World Tree's cavalry. "Scott Summers, thanks for the timing, Captain." Sam heard the customary heavy impact behind her. Logan emerged from the smoke of the drop pod. He was wearing his torn leather jacket, a fresh cigar clenched between his teeth, his adamantium claws fully extended and shining under the purple lights of Chronopolis. His wild eyes landed on Cyclops, Jean, Storm and Nightcrawler, and he paused. It had been a century of total, relentless anguish, so to see his family standing there in the flesh was a shock that bypassed his healing factor completely. Scott eyed the wasteland Ronin. He saw the gray in Logan's beard, the heavy, inconceivable toll of years written into his damaged face. "You look like hell, Logan," Cyclops murmured, a tight, genuine smirk breaking his tactical stoicism. "And you're still wearing the Boy Scout tights, Slim," hissed Logan, thick-voiced. He didn't embrace them. He did not cry. He had just moved up to the front, shoulder to shoulder with the leader of the X-Men. "Let's clear up your mess." Jean Grey smiled. A tear ran down her cheek. "Glad to see you back, Logan." Before the reunion could settle, the 3 huge Chronos golems lifted themselves off the cratered floor. The Panopticon's Earth gravity was normalizing, and the siege engines locked their chronologic targeting lasers on the hero's concentrated cluster. They absorb kinetic power and energy blasts by turning them into dust. Cyclops aimed his visor. "I warn you. We need to hit their temporal cores at the same time." "You just point the way, Summers," Sam ordered. Then out of nowhere a burst of violet gold light exploded in the middle of the plaza. The synergy of spark and mutation Naruto Uzumaki appeared using the Shunshin, walking out of the light. The primal gold aura buzzed clean and hard about him. He caught Jean Grey's eye, a nod to the telepathic bridge that had carried them through the dark. "You're the anchor," Jean replied. He could feel the shinobi radiate an overpowering, thick terrestrial life force. "And you were the spark," Naruto said respectfully. He peered up at the massive Chronos golems storming their position. "Tony, Miles. We're taking the legs. X-Men. Clear the airspace." Naruto didn't draw his sword. He compressed the primal gold into his fists and formed a large, weighty Rasengan. "Kurt! With me!" Miles Morales shouted as he swung down from the skies on a line of web. Nightcrawler grinned, immediately catching on. BAMF. Kurt transported right down beside the falling Spider-Man. He grabbed Miles by the arm. BAMF. 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 In a dizzying, blinding series of teleportation, Nightcrawler and Miles blinked completely around the rightmost of the Chronos golems. Whenever they appeared, Miles would fire a localized shot of kinetic feedback webbing, immediately tying up the golem's massive, chronological legs with unbreakable Stark Tech wires. The golem stumbled, not aging the webbing fast enough. "Storm!" Naruto yelled as he charged toward the golem in the middle. Aurora Munro's eyes flashed with pure white. "I command the winds of a dying universe still." She produced a gigantic localized cyclone of purple crackling plasma lightning and directed it straight down at Naruto. Naruto didn't avoid the lightning. He raised his golden Rasengan to the heavens, snatching Storm's multiversal lightning and savagely folding it into his Earth kinetic sphere. The resulting fusion was horrific. The sphere grew, a volatile, blinding mix of gold and purple plasma. Primal Arts. Rasengan of the Tempest. Naruto smashed the fused sphere into the chest of the central Chronos golem. The localized aging field of the machine tried to decay the attack, but the pure and unpredictable chaos of Storm's multiversal lightning shorted out the temporal absorption entirely. The golem burst apart with a violence that sent its compressed chronological mass flying in a spray of incandescent but harmless glass. At the same time, Cyclops let off a max-yield optic blast, telekinetically controlled by Jean Grey to a precisely concentrated, hyper-dense needle of kinetic ruby light. The beam struck the exact center of the third golem's temporal core and it crashed to the ground in a heap of corroded, inert iron. Logan jumped atop the frozen first golem, slamming his adamantium claws deep into its cranium casing and ripping out its central processor with a furious roar. The combined strength of the World Tree and the X-Men had completely destroyed the strong siege line of Immortus in less than 30 seconds. The voice at the end of the square was silent, except for the distant buzz of the Panopticon looming ominously above the city. The Chrono Centurions were in full retreat, abandoning the outer sectors and falling back towards the absolute center of Chronopolis. "They're leaving the perimeter," Sam said, his shield snapping back into his gauntlet. "Immortus is gathering his forces in the Citadel." Naruto glanced across toward the middle of the city. A colossal, needle-like skyscraper rose above the pearlescent iron skyline, pulsating with a dark, stifling temporal gravity. It seemed less like a skyscraper than a giant syringe stuck in the fabric of the dimension. Suddenly, the architecture of the city itself began to hum. Prime Kang's voice was not coming from a speaker. It shook through the pearlescent iron beneath their feet, bouncing off every wall and tower in Sector 4. "You carried your citadel to my grave. How wonderfully convenient." Immortus's voice was smooth, chillingly serene, and laced with total dominance. "I was about to send my fleets into the bleed and seek your World Tree. But you have carried the roots to my very doorstep. We didn't come to hide, Immortus. Tony Stark," he cried, the silver armor magnifying his voice. "We have come to cancel your account." "You are fundamentally wrong about your situation, Mr. Stark," said Immortus. The vacuum of the heat death, utter black, the sky above them, began to change. The dead stars didn't rekindle, they started to strain violently, warping as a tremendous, inexplicable gravitational force awoke at the limits of the pocket dimension. "You think you wage a normal war," echoed Immortus's voice. "But I am no warlord. I am the steward of the end. Chronopolis wasn't just any city. It's the cork that stops the multiverse's ultimate last entropy." Naruto's sovereign senses howled. The energy of the dimension was not simply withering away, it was being actively armed. "I am beginning the loom of the end," Immortus announced. "I'll just crush the heat death of the universe down into this confined region. I shall weaponize the very finality of time itself against you to destroy your watchtower, your X-gene, your light, into fundamental nothingness." The iron earth underneath them shivered furiously. The boundaries of Chronopolis began to unwrite themselves, not into ash, but into pure unadulterated vacuum. "He's sinking the dimension," Jean cried out as her telekinesis struggled against the sudden huge rise in ambient entropy. "Sam." Get the Vanguard to the Panopticon. Draw the Void Slayer. Naruto commanded, the primal gold erupting about him as he drew the Void Slayer, the celestial marble shining fiercely against the encroaching darkness. We don't pull back. Cyclops fired back, his mask glowing red. Get this dimension and weaponize it, he wipes the board. We're not running away, Scott, murmured Naruto, his blue eyes fixed on the vast citadel in the heart of the falling city. The shinobi's voice was like the unyielding iron of the hidden leaf. We're going to snip the plug. The collapse of a universe at the conclusion of its life is not a violent explosion. It is the complete and terrible cessation of heat, light, and motion. At the boundary of Sector 4, the pearlescent iron spires of Chronopolis stopped functioning. They did not shatter into dust. Rather, the ambient entropy seeping in from the very limits of the pocket dimension absorbed them into pure, chilling nothingness. Immortus was weaponizing the cold, hard physics of the universe's heat death, whereas God Emperor Doom used magic to dominate reality. The temperature within the plaza dropped to absolute zero. The atmospheric pressure is flatlining. Tony 892 yelled across the intercom, his Aegis Matrix armor icing over at startling speed. Immortus is venting the city's localized heat directly into the bleed. If that entropy wave strikes the Panopticon, the watchtower's dark matter core will immediately freeze solid. Not on my watch, Sam Wilson demanded. The captain activated his Wakandan rockets, quickly soaring toward the moon-sized castle floating over the falling metropolis. Vanguard, retreat back to the ship. We will project a localized thermal vibranium shield to maintain airspace. Ground team, you have exactly 10 minutes to cut the plug before the entropy wave consumes the dimension. 10 minutes is a lifetime, Captain, Cyclops said, placing his hand on his brilliant ruby quartz visor. He turned to face his crew, his tactical mind quickly reacting to the presence of the Multiversal Alliance. X-Men. Form up around the Golden Saint. He is our heat source. Naruto Uzumaki didn't hesitate. He pushed the primal gold chakra out, creating a dazzling, confined dome of warm, earthly fire. Within a 30-foot radius, the entropy storm's absolute zero was pushed back, resulting in a mobile safe zone with ideal heat. Remain in the light, Naruto growled, drawing the massive marble of the Void Slayer. We march on the Citadel. The Null Legion, the strike team, advanced as one destructive unit. Naruto took the ultimate lead, acting as a living sun against the chilly darkness. Logan and Cyclops flanked him, with Jean, Storm, Tony, Miles, and Nightcrawler forming the perimeter. They tore down the major causeway leading to the citadel of Immortus, which was tall and needle-like. However, Prime Kong refused to allow them to approach his throne. Immortus's final resistance sprang from the shadows of crumbling iron construction. They were not Chrono-Centurions. They were Null Wraiths, massive floating robotic skeletal structures made completely of concentrated anti-energy. They did not use weapons. Their mere touch caused regional heat death. Don't let them touch you, Jean Grey warned, her pink telekinetic aura erupting as she read the total, terrible nothingness within the construction's code. They remove kinetic energy. If they grab you, your heart will immediately freeze. Then we won't let them get close, Storm has declared. Aurora Munro rose to the top of Naruto's golden dome. She did not summon lightning, but rather a hyper-localized, intense heat updraft. The rapid shift in air pressure triggered a horizontal tornado of gale force winds, violently hurling the initial wave of Null Wraiths backward and breaking their fragile, skeleton frames against the pearlescent iron walls. Nightcrawler disappeared in a puff of purple brimstone and appeared atop a gathering of wraiths. Miles. Now, Miles Morales swung from the towering archway of a decaying clock tower. He delivered two powerful, localized blasts of kinetic feedback webbing right into Kurt's palms. Nightcrawler quickly teleported through the wraiths, binding the anti-energy constructions together with his Stark Tech webbing. Pull, Kurt yelled, reappearing inside the golden dome. Miles anchored his boots and tugged the webs. The Null Wraiths collided forcefully with each other. Tony. Cyclops yelled out, easily incorporating the Silver Stark into the X-Men's cadence. Give me a reflective surface. You got it, Slim. Tony banked hard, firing 3 localized, mirror-polished drone shields into the air to surround the tangled cluster of wraiths. Cyclops did not aim at the adversaries, he aimed for the drones. He released a powerful, Concentrated optic blast. The pure kinetic ruby light struck the first drone, ricocheted beautifully to the second, split on the third, and showered down on the null wraiths in a devastating, impenetrable cage of red laser fire. The structures were instantaneously incinerated, unable to withstand the massive, multi-directional kinetic assault. Tony mumbled, "Flawless geometry," as his faceplate monitored the ricochets. "The guy is a walking protractor. Keep moving." Logan yelled and charged ahead of the pack. The Wasteland Ronin did not care about anti-energy. Logan fought with ferocity and terror, fueled by the presence of his family. Logan intercepted a null wraith as it attempted to lunge for Jean despite the optic blasts. He charged the skeletal machine, his adamantium claws slicing into its chest. Logan's right arm was quickly frozen solid by the wraith's targeted heat death aura, with the flesh withering and breaking, yet the mutant did not flinch. He used his left hand to decapitate the machine, his feral healing factor smoldering as it drove blood and heat back into his deadened arm. The vanguard of the sun, they reached the base of the citadel. The massive needle pulsed with horrible, dark purple chronological gravity. Massive, moving iron doors blocked the entry, which was powered by the same chronological circuitry as the chronal Nimrods. The entropy storm has totally devoured Chronopolis' outer sectors. The pure black nothingness was closing in, pressing hard against the boundaries of Naruto's primal gold dome. The air was thinning. "The doors are locked in a temporal loop," Tony yelled, his gauntlets sparking as he attempted to interact with the lock. "If we hit it, the iron immediately reverses the damage." Cyclops corrects, "Nothing is indestructible," recognizing a flaw in the physics. "The temporal loop is dependent on the timeline working smoothly." "Naruto, your sword destroys localized cosmic qualities, right?" Naruto confirmed, clutching the Void Slayer's pale marble, that it breaks the connection between magic and time. "Then we overload the loop," Cyclops said. "If I smash the door with maximal concussive force, the chronological circuitry will accelerate to reverse the damage." Naruto immediately understood when the circuitry exposed its temporal core to cure the iron. It was a perfect combination of sheer, unstoppable force and total, precise severance. "Jean," Cyclops addressed the telepath. Jean Grey nodded and extended her hands to Scott. "I'm taking the training wheels off." Her pink telekinetic aura curled around his head, bracing his neck and spine for the impending, catastrophic recoil. Cyclops reached up and removed his ruby quartz visor. The visual blast was so powerful it felt apocalyptic. Without the visor to direct it, the kinetic energy exploded in a tremendous, blinding wave of solid ruby force. The shock splintered the pearlescent iron beneath Scott's boots, but Jean's telekinesis kept him securely in place. The optic blast hit the time doors. The impact was deafening. The gigantic iron gates buckled, howling as the chronological circuitry flashed wildly purple, desperately attempting to rewind the localized destruction of the ruby wave. "Now, Naruto!" Cyclops shouted above the deafening sound. Naruto disappeared. The Shunshin transported him directly through the powerful ruby kinetic wave. His hyperdense Saiyan physiology, encased in primal gold, enabled him to resist Cyclops' attack. He appeared inches from the buckling iron doors. Cyclops projected that the temporal circuitry would be exposed and brilliant as it attempted to reverse time. Naruto wielded the massive, pale marble of the Void Slayer. Primal art. Anti-cosmic severance. The blade hit the incandescent temporal core. The anti-cosmic qualities of the celestial stone aggressively rejected the chronological plasma. The loop was broken. The iron doors were unable to withstand Cyclops' optic blast due to their lack of time-healing ability. The gates shattered inward, resulting in a million bits of harmless, rusting shrapnel. Cyclops closed his eyes and put his ruby quartz helmet back into place. He breathed heavily as Jean gently released her telekinetic grip. The loom of the end, the strike team entered the citadel through its shattered gates. This was not a throne room, it was an engine room of inconceivable size. The enormous, hollow needle held a scary sphere of pure, seething chronological plasma and dark matter. It resembled a dying, caught star. Cables of purple chronal iron extended from the sphere and sank directly into the citadel's walls. The loom of the end. Immortus stood on a small floating platform in front of the loom. He wasn't wearing armor. He wore his pristine purple and green robes. He didn't appear alarmed when the Alliance and X-Men surrounded him. He simply gazed at the golden pocket watch in his palm before snapping it close. 3 minutes and 42 seconds, Immortus said quietly, turning to face them. You broke through the formidable gates of Chronopolis faster than my algorithms projected. The addition of the mutant variable to the shinobi constant created a synergy that I did not fully account for. Your math is always going to be wrong, Immortus, Tony Stark hissed as he leveled his repulsors at the Prime variant, because you factor out free will. Free will is an illusion of the uneducated, Mr. Stark, Immortus said calmly. He indicated the huge, spinning orb of dark matter behind him. You worked so hard to get to this room. To cut the plug, but you don't comprehend that I didn't build the loom of the end. Immortus's cold, terrifying smile chilled their blood. I just discovered it. Naruto's brows narrowed as the Void Slayer hummed in his hand. What is that machine? Immortus murmured. It's not a machine, Uzumaki. It's a cosmic egg. And, by destroying the chronology to halt doom, you unintentionally provided enough ambient multiversal radiation to incubate it. Immortus raised his arms. I am not using the universe's heat death to kill you, the Prime variant stated, his voice ringing with unwavering, horrifying devotion. I am venting the heat to feed the child. The huge orb of black matter frantically pulsed. The loom produced a deep, cosmic throb that shook reality to its core. It's hatching, Jean Grey muttered, collapsing to her knees and bringing her palms to her temples as the creature within the sphere threatened to crush her consciousness. Kill Kong! Logan shouted, pushing himself at the platform. Immortus didn't defend himself. He merely opened his arms to accept the death. Logan was unable to reach him as the sphere ruptured. Immortus, the X-Men, and the Alliance were quickly consumed by a dazzling white light that engulfed the Citadel. The Time War was over. The ultimate cosmic terror had now emerged. The flash of blinding light did not dissipate, it set solid. There was no concussive shockwave. There was no fireball, no local collapse of gravity. The Citadel's physical architecture, the iridescent iron of Chronopolis, the suffocating gloom of the dying cosmos, just ceased to be. Standing on nothing were Naruto Uzumaki, Sam Wilson, Tony Stark, Miles Morales, Logan and the X-Men. They were lost in a limitless, featureless sea of pure, dazzling white. There was no sky, no horizon, no ground. But their boots were firmly planted on the non-existent ground. There was no warmth or odor or sound surrounding it. It was the terrible, antiseptic silence of a blank canvas. My scanners are completely blind. Tony 892's voice shattered the silence, sounding infinitely little amid the vast white. His liquid silver faceplate snapped back into place. Friday is offline. The Aegis Matrix does not detect space, time or radiation. Its reading, 0. Mathematical 0 absolute. Where's Immortus? What is it you want? Asked Cyclops, his hand instinctively going to the ruby quartz visor, examining the barren abyss. He's right there, Jean Grey said, her voice shaking. Her pink telekinetic aura was securely wrapped up about her body, actively afraid to spread out into the abyss. 100 yards away the Prime variant drifted in the white space. But Immortus was not celebrating, he was breaking up. The purple and green robes of the Conqueror were crumbling to pale white ash. Immortus stared at his own hands, his cold, calculating eyes wide with an emotion he had not known since the birth of his chronological empire. Absolute, unmitigated powerlessness. I calculated the incubation. Immortus gulped, his voice echoing nowhere in the vacuum. I gave it the heat death. I was to be its lord, its daddy. The chronological circuitry embedded in his skin started to violently fracture, disintegrating to dust. You weren't its father, Kong. Logan growled, his adamantium claws fully extended, but he was hesitant to plunge into the featureless white nothingness. You were only the shell of an egg. Immortus raised his head, his eyes staring at something beyond the Alliance. It is beautiful, Immortus muttered. The Prime variant, the creator of the sacred timeline, the orchestrator of the Time War, burned away to white ash. He had not died a noble death in battle. The thing he had awakened just rejected him, wiped him from reality like a typo on a page. The Beander, Cap, Miles Morales said, taking a hesitant step back. That's what. The Alliance and the X-Men changed direction. The white light behind them was mounting to infinity, It did not become a horrible creature, a great cosmic dragon, or a mechanical god. It took the shape of a human silhouette. The creature came out of the light. It was completely androgynous, with features of exquisite, scary symmetry. Its skin was the same blinding white as the emptiness that around them, nearly making it seem two-dimensional. It had no guns, no armor. Its eyes were without pupils or irises, simply two pools of flawless, polished silver. There was no multiversal radiation, no magic, no temporal plasma. Naruto's sovereign senses pushed against the thing. It's not releasing energy. The primal gold aura erupted around him, reflexively seeking to push back the suffocating vacuum. It's a vacuum. It is the lack of everything. The thing spoke. You're quite loud. The voice did not pass across the air. It passed right through their eardrums, appearing directly in their minds. It was a voice without hatred, no anger, no arrogance. It was the cool, clinical gaze of a youngster examining an ant hill. Who are you? Sam Wilson stepped out from the vanguard, his vibranium shield raised, demanding. The alien cocked its head, studying the shield. I am the blank page, the thing said. They called me the end of the story, the temporal warlords. The sorcerers named me the Meander. But I'm just the eraser. We're not getting wiped out today, Cyclops said. Scott Summers didn't wait for a long speech. His tactical mentality saw an unequivocal, existential threat. He turned on a hyper-concentrated optic blast at maximum yield. The solid beam of ruby kinetics cut a path through the white nothingness, aimed squarely at the chest of the monster. The Meander didn't dodge, it didn't make a magic shield. It just stared at the beam. Delete. The optic blast did not bounce or detonate. The huge ruby beam just ceased to exist halfway between Cyclops and the Meander. It was perfectly truncated, neatly truncated, the kinetic energy lost in the absolute zero of the nothingness without so much as a spark. Cyclops promptly cut the broadcast, slipped his visor shut, mouth tightened. It cancelled out the kinetic force. No absorption. No deflection. It merely threw out physics. Your light is a mess, said the Meander softly. The whole canvas is a disaster. The timeline is full with overlapping sketches. The branches are intertwined. It needs a fresh start. The Meander lifted a pale, featureless hand. I shall begin with you. The anchor of the canvas. Move, Storm shouted. Aurora Munro tried to invoke the air pressure of the void to lift the crew, but her white eyes dilated in amazement. There is no atmosphere. I can't call the wind. Kurt, Logan shouted out. Nightcrawler disappeared with a BAMF, attempting to teleport just behind the Meander. But the purple brimstone flared and fizzled a few feet off. Kurt was there, dropping down hard on the illusory floor, gasping. The dimension is locked. Kurt terrified. Here is no distance in space. I'm teleporting in position. The hand of the Meander, lifted, gleamed with a gentle, silver radiance. It wasn't powering an attack. It was picking them. It's an ontology editing tool, Tony shouted, his genius mind trying to comprehend the impossible. It's gonna put us in the spotlight and backspace. Naruto Uzumaki moved forward. He didn't have the Void Slayer. A sword developed for the purpose of cutting through magic and time was worthless against a creature that predated both. Naruto, however, dug his vibranium boots into the illusory earth. He delved into the very depths of his terrestrial and multiversal biology. The primal gold, the searing, unending force of terrestrial life, exploded from his center, and yet, the Void Sage chakra, the heavy, certain gravity of multiversal anchoring, coursed through his cells. He imposed on them a violent and terrible equilibrium. 6 paths of the multiverse. Genesis anchor. Naruto didn't raise a barrier or a shield. He radiated sheer, irrefutable being. The nothingness was absolute white, smashed violently by a brilliant halo of violet and gold. The Meander brought down his hand, the conceptual erasure. The milky nothingness quivered. The wave of erasure swept through the Alliance and the X-Men. But it struck the violet gold glow. The Golden Saint shouted, his hyper-dense Saiyan musculature straining as the sheer, unfathomable weight of the Meander's elimination slammed against his existence. Naruto's eyes and nose bled simultaneously. The physical tension was tearing at his cellular structure, at the microscopic level. But he did not shrink. The terrestrial fire of primal gold would not be extinguished. The multiversal weight of the Void Sage would not be shifted. Naruto literally slapped their existence onto the blank canvas. The Byander lowered its hand, its eyeless, silver gaze narrowing in real, childlike confusion. The Byander moved closer to the straining, bleeding shinobi. "You are a stain of ink that will not wash out," he remarked. "Interesting. We are not." "Ink?" Naruto yelled, the violet gold aura bursting up with a frantic, excruciating intensity. "We are live. Life is a temporary imperfection," the Byander said in a quiet voice. "I guess I'll just have to scrub harder." The Byander's erasure did not feel physically heavy. It was like falling asleep in the snow, a chilly, numbing pull that suggested how much easier it would be to quit existing altogether. Naruto Uzumaki refused to sleep. The Genesis Anchor, a powerful synthesis of the primal gold and void sage chakras, engulfed him in a blinding violet and gold aura. But the sphere was decreasing. The utter white of the Byander's vacuum was actively consuming the borders of his aura, transforming his terrestrial fire and multiversal gravity into blank, sterile nothing. Naruto fell to one knee. The vibranium deck plating on his boots broke on the unseen floor. "Naruto." Sam Wilson moved forward and pressed his hands against the Golden Saint's back. Sam lacked magic and cosmic radiation, but he possessed Captain America's uncompromising, tenacious heart. He used his physical might to prop up the shinobi. I can't hold the page open forever, Cap," Naruto ground out, his fangs smeared with his own blood. It's removing the concept of friction. I can't get a handle on reality." The Byander moved slowly and silently forward. Its flawless, gleaming eyes mirrored the struggling, bleeding oddities. "You suffer because you insist on keeping your shape," the thing said, its voice reverberating softly within their marrow. "Look at the timeline you're fighting for. It's full of battle, grief, and chronological deterioration. If you let go, there is no suffering. There is only the quiet. We'll take the noise," Logan hissed. The Wasteland Ronin approached the edge of Naruto's fading violet gold dome. He thrust his arms out of the protective aura. Logan's forearms quickly turned to white ash. The excruciating deletion completely bypassed his neurological system. His cells weren't dying. They were unhappening. However, Logan's mutant healing factor violently battled with the erasure, aggressively bringing flesh and blood back into existence as quickly as the void washed it away. Logan's shout of survival echoed across the silence. "Tony!" Cyclops exclaimed, his palm resting on his helmet as he observed Logan acting as a living shield. "Standard physics is dead. Kinetic energy is nullified. How can we combat a blank space?" Tony 892 quickly cycled through the Aegis Matrix sensors. His silver faceplate flickered, as the Endo-Sim nanotechnology struggled to compute in a zero-variable environment. "We don't fight it, Slim," Tony exclaimed, his brilliant intellect snapping the abstract jigsaw pieces together. "The Byander prefers a blank canvas. It removes things by negating their influence. If you shoot a single laser, it simply presses backspace." "So, Stark, what's the play?" Storm commanded, hovering only inches over the illusory Earth. "You don't shoot an eraser," Tony declared, his faceplate retracting and his eyes blazing with wild, earthly intensity. "You scribbled. You use so much crazy, sloppy, irrational ink on the page that the eraser becomes clogged." The masterpiece of chaos was immediately grasped by Jean Grey. "He's right." Jean pushed her telepathic voice into everyone's minds at once, bypassing the void's dead air. "It's a conceptual entity. It removes order by setting it to zero. However, life is not orderly. Life is chaotic. We need to overrun its local processing capacity." X-Men. Avengers. Sam Wilson led, knowing the abstract physics of the war. "Empty the tank. Don't aim at the Byander, aim everywhere. Paint the room." Naruto stood up, his blue eyes flaming with the will of fire. Cyclops yelled. "Now," as Scott Summers pulled off his visor. He did not drop the Genesis Anchor, but rather expanded it to become the team's localized reality. He did not shoot a single focused ray. He threw his head back, releasing a wild, widely dispersed wave of pure ruby-red kinetic light. It splattered across the unseen ceiling of the white nothingness like a jagged, bleeding scarlet scar. Storm's eyes were pure white. Lacking an atmosphere, She created one artificially using the localized heat of Naruto's aura. She conjured a wild, twisting nebula of deep purple lightning and chilling blue hail, devoid of any natural meteorological laws. Nightcrawler vanished quickly using teleportation. BAMF. 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 He did not advance to assault. Rather, he proceeded to poison the nothingness, leaving behind thick, expanding clouds of dark, sulphurous purple brimstone that stubbornly clung to the empty air. Miles Morales used his Stark Tech kinetic feedback webbing. He discharged dozens of heavy, glowing golden and red web lines into the empty space, anchoring them to nothing and resulting in a gigantic, tangled, glowing spiderweb of kinetic energy suspended in the white. Tony Stark instructed the Aegis Matrix to separate from his body. Millions of liquid silver nanites blasted outward, spinning like a metallic cyclone and reflecting the ruby light, purple lightning, and golden chakra in a dazzling, chaotic kaleidoscope. Sam Wilson slammed his vibranium gauntlet on the shield. The unbreakable metal chimed, creating visible, overlapping ripples of pure, terrestrial sound resonance that physically shook the void's calm. Jean Grey used her telekinetic and telepathic abilities to their full potential. She projected not only pink energy, but also their emotions. Logan's anguish, Tony's fear, Sam's resolution, Miles' hope, and Naruto's unwavering love for his planet all overflowed onto the antiseptic, blank canvas. The stained canvas, the void's stark whiteness, was replaced with vibrant colors. Ruby red, deep purple, liquid silver, brilliant pink, and blazing violet gold collided forcefully, creating a vast and beautiful storm of pure existence. It was a masterpiece of multiverse anarchy. The Beander paused. The entity's deletion wave shattered when it collided with the chaotic storm. The erase function could not account for the contradicting physics of magic, mutant biology, extraterrestrial nanotechnology, and spiritual chakra. This is mathematically incorrect, the Beander said, its silver eyes expanding slightly. A drop of red hit the Beander's pure white cheek. It was a mirror of Cyclops' optic blast, trapped in Miles' kinetic web. The crimson glow adhered to the entity's skin like wet paint. Storm's purple lightning struck its arm, leaving a burnt blemish on its otherwise immaculate white body. "You're bleeding on me," the Beander whispered, glancing at its stained hands. The chilly, detached inquiry was abruptly replaced by a flash of conceptual distress. It attempted to wipe away the colors, but the sheer density of their combined life was too much. The ink had set. "We are the multiverse, son of a bitch," Logan yelled, his adamantium claws fully repaired and shining under the chaotic lights of his family. "And we don't wash off." The Beander took a step back. The limitless, featureless white vacuum around them began to violently shake. Hairline fractures, illuminated by the dark, chaotic purple of the quantum bleed, began to spiderweb across the invisible floor and ceiling. They were breaking the canvas. "Naruto!" Jean shrieked, her telekinetic aura tensing under the enormous pressure. "The dimensions are cracking. Cut the page." The escaped Naruto Uzumaki received the command. He drew a chaotic storm of color and energy, including ruby light, lightning, vibranium resonance, and pink telekinesis, directly into the Genesis anchor. He served as the focal point for the whole Alliance and X-Men. He poured it all into the heavy, pale marble of the Void Slayer. The celestial blade ignited the chaotic spectrum of their united existence, rather than a single color. Naruto did not attack the Beander. He swung his sword directly down, slamming the blade into the Void's broken, invisible white floor. Primal art. Genesis shatter. The blade's anti-cosmic characteristics, along with the team's chaotic reality, created a striking blank canvas. The utter white nothingness broke with the sound of a trillion glass windows smashing. An enormous, jagged hole was abruptly ripped through the floor, revealing the whirling, limitless darkness of the quantum bleed beneath. "Fall back," Sam Wilson roared. The gravity of the bleed became more apparent. The squad did not jump, but was violently sucked downward through the jagged tear in the white space. As they plunged into the darkness, Naruto peered up. He saw the Beander through a shattered reality. The entity was no longer pure white. It was streaked with crimson, gold, purple, and silver. It wasn't pursuing them. It was simply standing there, staring at its own bloodied hands, contemplating the concept of imperfection for the first time since the beginning of time. The tear in the cloth snapped shut, shutting the white abyss away. The return to the watchtower. The strike team appeared in the quantum bleed's cold vacuum and fell through the cosmic darkness. The panopticon was floating beneath them, like a gorgeous silver moon amidst the stabilized, shimmering branches of the world tree. Sam cried, "Tony!" over the comms, deploying his vibranium wings to slow his descent. "I've got you, Cap." Tony, his liquid silver armor completely reactivated, launched a large, localized anti-gravity net from his gauntlets. The blue repulsor field slowed the heroes' descent and lowered them to the watchtower's primary launch deck. When Naruto's boots struck the vibranium deck, the Genesis anchor collapsed. The Golden Saint toppled forward, landing on his hands and knees. He was fully depleted, with his chakra network completely tapped out, but he was still alive. His blood flowed across the silver deck. Cyclops leaned heavily on his knees, breathing hard, his visor back in place. Jean Grey fell against the bulkhead, gripping her head. Logan retracted his claws, spitting blood on the deck, while Storm and Nightcrawler supported each other. The Panopticon's enormous outside blast doors opened, showing the warm, earthly light of the command deck. T'Challa and Hope Van Dyne ran out, accompanied by Wakandan medical drones. Sam Wilson rose up, wiping soot and snow off his face. He gazed at the fatigued, battered group of heroes, Avengers, mutants, and one shinobi. After surviving Doom and defeating Immortus, they successfully stained the blank page of the Meander. "Is everyone in one piece?" Sam inquired, his voice harsh yet firm. "Physically, mostly," Tony grumbled as his faceplate slid back. "Existentially, I guess I need a really strong drink and a nap." Logan approached Naruto, extending a big, calloused hand. Naruto looked up with a tired, genuine smile. He grabbed the mutant's hand, allowing Logan to pull him to his feet. Logan grunted, nodding in approval. "You kept the lights on." Naruto focused on the violet and gold multiversal canopy, which they had worked so hard to safeguard, rather than Logan. The branches remained steady. The X-Men were free. The Time War was over. Naruto realized the monster they left behind in the white space was not dead. It was simply thinking. "The canvas is stained," Naruto said gently to the stars. "But the artist is still out there." The medbay of the Panopticon was a haven of calm, rhythmic efficiency. No shrieking red klaxons. No temporal shockwaves tearing the bulkheads apart. No multiversal tyrants threatening complete erasure. The chilly air of the quantum bleed was only filtered by the faint, sweet chime of Wakandan diagnostic beds and the low thrum of the watchtower's life support systems. Naruto Uzumaki settled down on the side of a clean silver bio bed. Kinetic mesh bandages swaddled his upper torso, shimmering with an orange eldritch light, a local healing technique used by the medics of Kamar Taj. The pure cellular stress from anchoring the Genesis anchor against the Meander's erasing had almost shattered his bones, but his hyper-dense Saiyan physiology was already stitching the cracks back together. He gazed at his hands. The Primal Gold's terrible, relentless blaze, the Void Sage's heavy, fearful pull, were not in play. He was light, literally and spiritually, for the first time since the sky of Battleworld shattered. "You're brooding loud enough to wake the dead, kid." Naruto looked up. Logan leaned against the threshold of the medical facility, a fresh unlit cigar gripped between his teeth. The Wasteland Ronin appeared very much untouched. His mutant healing factor had completely healed from the localized heat death of the Null Wraiths, albeit his torn leather jacket had seen better days. "I am not brooding, Logan," Naruto grinned weakly, rolling his right shoulder and winced slightly at the stiffness. "I am just hearing the silence. It's bizarre. Like forgetting to breathe, since the air is suddenly clean." Logan gave a grunt of assent and entered the room, sitting on a nearby supply container. "You get used to fighting in the dirt so long, you forget what the sky looks like. But you deserved the rest, Uzumaki. You anchored the whole bloody forest." "We stained the canvas," Naruto corrected softly. "It wasn't just me. We're all chaotic." Logan chuckled low and gravelly. He examined his own hands. No scars on the knuckles. His family, Scott, Jean, Aurora, Kurt, resting in the next recovery ward at this moment. He had mourned them for a century, living in the radioactive dust of a truncated timeline. Now they were asleep next door, breathing, living and protected. "I don't know what's next," Logan said. the vulnerability rare and deep. I'm a soldier, Naruto. I know how to withstand the end of the world. I don't know anything about living in a new one. You don't have to figure it out by yourself anymore, Naruto continued, his blue gaze warm and firm. The world tree. That's what it's for. We grow together. Logan was about to respond, when the thick doors of the medical bay opened. Sam Wilson walked in, his vibranium mesh outfit freshly repaired. Weary though the captain was, the crushing, tremendous burden of command that had pressed down on him since the days of the God Emperor Doom was finally gone. Sorry to disturb the shore leave, gentlemen, Sam replied, a proud and exhausted look on his face. But T'Challa and Tony just completed charting out the stabilized branches. We need the vanguard in the command deck. We have an organization to multiverse. The Council of the Canopy. They had converted the main command deck of the Panopticon. The giant tactical holodouble no longer showed defensive perimeters or incursion alerts or Kong fleet movements. Instead, it displayed a breathtakingly detailed, three-dimensional map of the world tree. The center stabilized trunk was the nucleus from which thousands of timelines radiated forth, shimmering with brilliant healthy shades of blue, violet, and gold. They drifted in the ambient currents of the quantum bleed, entirely unbound by the chronological iron that Immortus had sought to impose on them. The builders of the New Age stood around the table. Sam, Tony, T'Challa, Hope Van Dyne, Naruto, Logan. Ahead of them stood the temporal orphans, Cyclops, Jean Grey and Storm. It's beautiful, Jean muttered, the pink telekinetic aura around her now perfectly calm. She reached out, her palm passing through the holographic representation of a blooming timeline. I can sense them. Tens of trillions of minds. They are no longer afraid, they're just existing. That is the sound of reality unbound, Ms. Grey, said T'Challa, regal voice full of great admiration. There are no more Kangs to trim the branches, no more Doom to enforce an absolute magical stasis, and the multiverse is finally allowed to grow spontaneously. Entropy and creativity balance again. It's a bit of a mess, Tony 892 commented, leaning against the console with a mug of coffee in his hand. Some of these timeframes are intersecting, sharing localized physics. But Friday reveals that the incursion rate has decreased to absolute zero. Naruto anchored the roots in and the multiversal friction is being safely diffused. We are not a sacred timeline anymore. We are a jungle. Cyclops glanced at the map, the ruby quartz visor reflecting the glowing branches. He was strategist, a born leader forged in the harsh embers of mutant existence. He gazed at the endless possibilities, but his thoughts jumped to logistics. What will become of us? Scott? He inquired, his voice stoic, but tense. Our timeline, the Earth we fought for, was clipped by Immortus centuries ago. We were in a vault at the end of time. We are ghosts of the time. There's no branch to go back to. The room was quiet. This was the grim reality of life after the Time War. The X-Men had survived the destruction of their universe, but victory had left them without a home. You're not ghosts, Scott, remarked Sam, stepping forward. You are heroes of the Alliance. You bleed. You fight. And you stood with us against the Beyonder. You have a home here. On a military watchtower, Storm asked softly, her white eyes drinking in the frigid silver bulkheads of the Panopticon. We thank you, Captain. But my folks. All our lives we've fought. We don't want to be a standing army in the void, permanently. We desire a home. We want to see the sky again, she said. T'Challa smirked, punched a command into his Wakandan beads. The Sorcerer Supreme said, we expected this. On the holographic map, a particular branch close to the inner canopy of the World Tree had been newly stabilized and expanded. It had picked out one virgin planet. When Battleworld started falling apart, we picked up big, deserted areas that weren't yet tainted by the magic of Doom or the industry of the Kangs, T'Challa continued. This is Krakoa Earth. It is a planet of raw terrestrial energy, without human civilization, but ecologically ideal. It has a breathable atmosphere, enormous oceans and a confined magnetic field that naturally guards against multiversal radiation. T'Challa gazed at Cyclops and Jean. It's a clean slate, Scott Summers. A place of refuge. We've built a robust, permanent multiversal gate, linking this Earth directly to the Panopticon. If you want it, the X-Men, and any mutant versions we rescue from the fading timelines can have it as your own. Logan's eyes opened a little wider. He glanced at the green, wild, untouched world in the holograph display. None. Weapon X no destroyed cities. Only sky and ground. Scott gazed at Jean. The telepath nodded, tears filling her eyes. We'll take it. Cyclops replied, thickly, with an intensity he seldom let himself display. He stared at Sam, Tony and Naruto. Thanks. Everything. You are family now, Slim, Tony grinned, holding his coffee mug. Just don't expect us to assist you mow the yard. I'm a plant man, not an engineer. The Vanguard's new mandate with the future of the X-Men safe, Sam switched the tactical display. We have a house for mutants. We've got a stabilized world tree, Sam told the Alliance leadership. But our work is not over. The Time War left wounds on countless of universes. Rogue Doombots. Stranded Kong variations. Stranded multiversal migrants, all over the canopy. Sam hit a button, and the symbols of the Alliance, the Wakandan Panther, the Stark Arc Reactor, the Hidden Leaf, flickered into the air. The Panopticon's not just a defensive bunker anymore, Sam said, falling into his role as the Supreme Commander of the multiverse's foremost peacekeeping army. We're an embassy. We're a beacon. We will send localized relief teams to the damaged timeline. We'll find the remains of the dynasty. We will protect the garden. Naruto stood up, ignoring the pain in his ribs. The fire in his blue eyes burned strong and steady. This was the Hidden Leaf's dream, but on an infinite scale. Naruto nodded. We stand our ground. Okay, people. Sam clasped his palms together. Compulsion repose for 48 hours. Eat actual food. Sleep in a real bed. Because on Monday the Alliance goes to work. The command deck emptied slowly, the heroes retreating to their rooms with a deep, shared sense of victory. The horror of Battleworld and Chronopolis was past. Epilogue. The smudge on the canvas beyond the stable branches of the world tree. Beyond the dark matter of the quantum bleed. The total white vacuum. The featureless white void. There was no sound. It was endless. The Beander was in the middle of the emptiness. The monster had not moved since the Alliance had broken the invisible floor and escaped. It was standing completely motionless, its gleaming, pupil-less eyes staring down at its own hands. It damaged the perfect white skin of its body, two-dimensional. Its left palm was forever emblazoned with a streak of vivid, chaotic ruby-red kinetic light. A jagged scar of deep crackling purple multiversal lightning was up its forearm. And on its chest were obvious shimmering flecks of brilliant violet gold, the earthly ink of Naruto Uzumaki's existence. The Beander raised his dirty hand. It didn't feel any pain. It did not sense wrath at disobedience. A new feeling, which cast off its precise mathematical programming utterly. Curiosity. The thing clenched its hand into a fist. The ruby light, the violet gold chakra did not delete. They hummed with the dirty, illogical, chaotic pulse of life. The page is blotched, the Beander said to the infinite hush. The thing glanced at the jagged, healing tear in the invisible floor of the emptiness, where the anomalies had plunged back into their untidy, tangled multiverse. I can't get the ink out of here, the Beander continued, its voice utterly devoid of malice, but bearing a scary, cosmic promise. I have to go into the painting. I need to learn how to draw. The white nothingness, absolute, quivered. The Beander stepped forward and gently descended into the dark. The most difficult battle for a soldier is not the war, it's the first quiet morning since the armistice. Inside the Panopticon's lower hangar bay, Wakandan ambient illumination replaced the harsh combat alert lights. The thunderous roar of endosim weapons had been replaced by the steady, industrial thud of cargo lifters and the buzz of repulsor engines. Naruto Uzumaki, the Golden Saint who had anchored the multiverse with his bare hands, was now lugging 6 large, steel-reinforced supply containers. He did not employ the primal gold chakra. He did not use shadow clones. He merely employed his raw, terrestrial Saiyan biology, sweating from the effort of the rigorous exertion and wearing a genuine smile. You are aware that we have anti-gravity pallets for this purpose, correct? Miles Morales swung down from the ceiling on a thin Stark Tech web line, resting lightly on Naruto's crates. The spider was dressed casually in a Wakandan hoodie and cargo pants rather than his armored gear. Naruto muttered, "Machines break, Miles," as he carried the heavy load up the ramp of a multiversal transport shuttle. And lifting heavy objects keeps the blood flowing. It reminds me that I'm still on the ground. Naruto placed the cartons in the cargo hold with a heavy metallic bang. He wiped his brow with the back of his bandaged palm and took a deep, contented breath. "Isn't it weird?" Miles inquired, stepping down to the deck. He gazed out at the vast hangar, where Wakandan relief workers and Stark drones were loading food, medical supplies, and localized terraforming engines into dozens of ships. No Kangs. There are no enormous green sky lasers. We are just delivering groceries. It's not strange, Miles, Naruto remarked softly, looking around the buzzing hangar. This is what we fought for. We did not save the World Tree to guard a stronghold. We spared it so that others could live. This is what living looks like. The hangar's internal communication system alerted Miles before he could answer. It wasn't the deafening red klaxon of an incursion, but rather the sharp, double tone of a vanguard priority summon. "Uzumaki, Morales. Report to the command deck." Sam Wilson's voice reverberated clearly over the speakers. "We have a situation on Earth 14. Naruto and Miles exchanged glances. Naruto and Miles arrived to a bustling command deck on Earth 14, ending the calm morning. Tony 892 stood at the middle holotable with his model Prime. Aegis Matrix armor retracted to his black suit collar. He was clutching a cup of coffee, but his eyes were fixed on the strange data running over the holographic display. Sam Wilson stood alongside him with arms crossed and vibranium wings folded tightly against his back. "What are we looking at, Captain?" Naruto inquired, going up to the table. "Did a remnant of the dynasty slip through the quarantine net?" "I wish it was Kong," Tony mumbled, poking the console. "Kong makes sense. Kong applies math. This is a toddler finger painting over the laws of physics." The holotable projected a three-dimensional picture of Earth 14, a stable and technologically standard universe located in the World Tree's middle canopy. The projection focused on the continent of North America, particularly on a big metropolitan city. It looked like Chicago, but it was completely wrong. A Wakandan relief team dropped into Earth 14 to deliver atmospheric scrubbers, Sam said, his voice tightening. 10 minutes ago, all communication from the surface was terminated. However, it was not a normal localized jamming signal. Look at the telemetry. Tony modified the holographic feed to display the visual data from the last drone before it went dark. Naruto's eyes expanded. The city's skyscrapers were not damaged, but they did bend. The steel and glass constructions twisted like soft clay, forming inconceivable, gravity-defying knots. The sky above the city wasn't blue. It was a swirling, liquid mixture of brilliant pink and deep, inconceivable silver. Cars were floating through the air, but they weren't flying. The local gravity had simply been rewritten to function as water. "Is it a reality warper?" Miles inquired, leaning closer to the projector. "Like the Black Priest?" Tony inquired. "Reality warpers use magic or localized cosmic energy to bend the rules." He shook his head, his voice filled with unease. "Friday is not reading any eldritch spells. There is no cosmic power. There is no temporal plasma. The city is not being changed by a force. It's being redrawn. The universe's fundamental programming is being modified in real time." Naruto marveled at the city's swirling and inconceivable colors. He considered the blank, featureless white vacuum. He considered the creature that annihilated concepts by simply commanding them cease to exist. "The page is stained. I must enter the painting." "It's the Beander," Naruto said quietly, a cold chill racing down his spine. Sam gazed at the shinobi. "The entity from the void? Who sought to delete us? Do you believe it followed us back?" "It did not pursue us to fight," Naruto remarked, his blue eyes hardening into pure iron. "It said it wanted a clean slate. But we contaminated its canvas. We showed it turmoil. It's not destroying Earth 14, Sam. It is experimenting. It's attempting to figure out how our reality works by disassembling it." "A cosmic toddler with a scalpel," Tony concluded bitterly. "Suit up. We are going to Chicago." The surreal descent, the Hiraishin left the multiversal slipstream and entered Earth 14's atmosphere. As soon as they entered the Chicago reality distortion area, the ship's internal physics began to collapse. "Warning. The atmospheric density reads as solid liquid. Tony shrieked from the pilot's seat, his hands flying over the manual overrides as the Aegis matrix enveloped him in silver armor. Gravity fluctuates between 0 and 10 gigaseconds every 5 seconds. The ship cannot compensate. Take us down manually, Sam commanded, bracing himself against the co-pilot console. Tony let the ship fall and let the dark matter engines to guide it through the neon-pink sky, rather than trying to fly it. They collided hard on what used to be a gigantic suspension bridge, but the asphalt was spongy, rippling like a massive, gray trampoline under the weight of the obsidian vehicle. The doors to the cargo bay hissed as they opened. Naruto, Sam, Tony, and Miles walked out onto the bridge. The city was gorgeous, terrifying, and completely silent. The cacophony of an urban hub, such as honking automobiles, rushing wind, and hum of power, was completely gone. In its stead was an odd, echoing noise, like a gigantic tuning fork vibrating underwater. The inhabitants of Chicago did not die, they were frozen. Civilians were suspended mid-step on sidewalks. A flock of pigeons was paused mid-flight, suspended in the air like a snapshot. However, unlike the Chronal Nimrod victims, they were not frozen in time. Naruto approached a frozen civilian holding a briefcase. "He's breathing," Naruto observed, his sovereign senses picking up on the man's feeble, terrifyingly sluggish heartbeat. However, his localized timeline has been stretched. For him, 1 second takes 1,000 years to process. "Look at the colors," Miles exclaimed, pointing to a nearby traffic light. The color red revealed itself, not merely shone brightly. An enormous, floating cube of pure, solid red light hung in the air next to the fixture, as if the concept of color had been removed from the item it represented. "It is extremely complicated." The voice did not originate from behind them. It came from everywhere at once, emerging straight into their consciousness. The vanguard turned. The Beander stood at the center of the suspension bridge's soft, rippling tarmac. But it wasn't the immaculate, two-dimensional, bright white silhouette they had fought in the emptiness. It had taken shape. The Beander appeared to be a human male, possibly in his early 30s. The execution, however, was severely wrong and disturbing. He wore a mismatched combination of human attire, including a pristine tuxedo jacket over a rusted, medieval chainmail shirt and bright yellow rain boots. His skin was no longer perfectly white. It was moving, furiously cycling among human skin tones, unable to decide on a single tint. The most scary detail was his eyes. They were no longer plain silver lakes. He had irises, but they were the exact, blinding violet gold of Naruto's Genesis anchor, with a jagged scar of deep purple lightning running down his cheek. The permanent stains they had left on his absolute canvas. "You're wearing our ink," Naruto said, taking a step forward, the primal gold aura bursting into life to counteract the bridge's stifling, bizarre physics. The Beander examined his own hands and flexed his newly made human fingers. "I attempted to replicate the shape of your existence," the Beander stated. When he spoke, his physical mouth moved, yet the sound flowed through the air and echoed in their skulls. "It's terribly inefficient. This biological vessel needs air, food, and rest. Why do you tolerate such fragile architecture?" "Because it's ours," Sam Wilson responded, raising his vibranium shield. "You have to return this city to the way you found it. You're harming these folks." The Beander tilted his head, clearly bewildered. The creature inquired, "Hurting?" "I did not erase them. I've just paused their kinetic functions to investigate their composition. I'm analyzing the painting. I'm trying to make sense of the chaos." The Beander pointed at a large skyscraper in the distance. "For example, to remain upright, that structure requires a focused center of gravity. I found the rule arbitrary." The Beander flicked his wrists. The 100-story building was forcefully inverted. The concrete and steel tore itself from the bedrock, flipping completely upside down and perfectly balanced on its own radio antenna in the center of the city. "Stop," Tony Stark yelled, raising his repulsors. "You can't just change reality to satisfy your curiosity. Those rules affect trillions of lives." The Beander focused his violet gold eyes on the silver Stark. "But the rules are inconsistent," the Beander said quietly. "You fight to preserve a reality that deteriorates, rusts, and eventually dies. I offered you the total piece of a blank page, but you refused it. You choose the noise. I'm merely attempting to memorize the music." The entity approached Naruto. "You are the anchor," the Beander stated, extending out a hand to the Golden Saint. "You made me feel the weight of existence. Teach me to draw." "I'm not going to teach you by allowing you to tear a universe apart," Naruto snarled, his voice harsh, the hefty marble of the Void Slayer materializing in his fingers. The Beander paused. His skin's fluctuating colors had suddenly fixed into a stark, chilly gray. "You misunderstand," the Beander murmured, his childlike wonder gone, replaced by the dreadful, limitless pressure of utter power. "I'm not asking for a lesson. I'm taking the brush. Stay tuned for more." Thank you for taking the time to listen to this video. I'm thrilled you watched the video. If you enjoyed it, be sure to like and subscribe for even more exciting content coming your way soon.